Black History Collaborative. Then after that, in October, on the 13th at 12 p.m., we have another Conversations on the Commons on Gender and Sexuality History. On October 27th, a conversation separating fact from fiction, historical Halloween programming, which promises to be a fun one. Then in November, on the 17th, we have Conversations on the Commons, the ins and outs of utilizing AI, which I know Plune is very excited about, and I am as well. Then in December, on the 8th, we have a conversation called Oh Snap, Photography in Your Collections. So we have a lot coming up this season. And before we get started on our topic for today, just some general housekeeping. Once we start our conversation, please keep your microphone muted until you're called on. This just lowers the general background noise. This is meant to be an informal conversation, so we do invite you to turn on your video if you'd like. And let's see, use the chat. So we do send it around after. Start by introducing yourself. So you can put your name, email address, and town or organizations if you want to share those. You can also comment, ask questions, share resources, or raise any tech issues you may have during the conversation. Let us know if you have something to say by raising your hand. You can do this by clicking on the participants list, and there should be a raise hand option. If you are on the phone, or if you can't find this raise hand option, you can ask to break in. And please, if you can, make sure your name is correct. We do keep a count of who's here at these meetings, so it does help us just to, make sure we're recording the correct person who's attended the conversation today. And this hasn't happened lately. I don't think this is something that usually tends to happen these days, but should we get Zoom bombed, we will immediately close the conversation and restart. But again, I don't expect that to happen today. But if it does, just keep an eye on your email. After today's conversation, we'll send a link in the chat for a survey so you can tell us what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, what you like, what you don't. And we do always look at these surveys because, it's always good to keep improving as we're able. And for those of you following the live stream, there's a link to the survey in the Conversations archive. I'd like to thank thank MHA's top sponsors. And these are Mass Humanities, the State Historical Records Advisory Board, or MA-SHRAB, Mike Pataski, and the, Lawrence History Center. You can find all of our sponsors on the Commons website, and the link to that will also be in the chat. Finally, we'd like to invite your organization to join our Commons directory, which is free, and to sponsor the Commons, which obviously is not free, but it does go to a good cause, as you all know, as you're here today. So I'll drop several links in the chat once I finish speaking. A link to our sponsors, how you can donate, how you can check out the directory, and finally, a link to the survey form. So let's get going. Today, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Plune Boretius, who is the former president of the Mass History Alliance and the principal of Swift River Press Public History and Communications. She works with historical organizations on their planning and projects, and she also helps them to manage their historic buildings. Her alter ego is the writer and photographer Agatha O. So with that, I'll turn it over to Plune.
Thank you, Rachel. I have one question for you. If it should come to pass that we get Zoom bombed, you're going to send everybody a link, right, to start again?
Yes.
Not on the same link. We're going to go to a new link.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear to people. Thank you, Rachel. That was a wonderful introduction. I am so happy to be here today. I haven't been on the Commons in a while, since I was gone part of last semester, part of last year, so over the spring. So I'm happy to get going. So today's topic is GOT treasurer. It's the hardest position board position to fill for small nonprofits. Not only does a treasurer do the usually fairly simple books, but they report to the Massachusetts and federal government. The requirements are murky. The schedule gets lost when the position changes hands. Things become a problem. When do you need what to file what kind of 990 and to whom? What do you do if it has to be filed online? What's to file with the Massachusetts Attorney General and when? Accounting firms cost an arm and a leg, especially for small historical organizations with little or no staff and budgets under 50 grand or even under 200 grand. Should you hire a pro anyway? Go it yourself and hope for the best. That's always what I do, and it doesn't always work out the best. Join us for a conversation that will clear up some of the issues and discuss what kind of financial records need to be kept. We'll share tricks and tips about software and links for filing. Join us and share your tips, experience, and fiascos. Together, we can come up with enough knowledge to save us all a bunch of money, which we can then put towards history programming, which I think is a good idea. Before I introduce our speaker today, our panelist, I'm going to launch a poll just for us to see who's in the room, and it will help Mark to shape his. You have logged in for, okay. Rachel, can you launch the poll at all?
I think I just did.
I don't see it. Oh, you do see it? Others see it? Okay, good. I can't, for some reason, it's not showing up for me.
I think it's because we're on the same account.
Yeah.
But as long as everyone else sees it, that's what matters.
Yep, that's good. And so you'll manage when you close it and all that. I see there's a lot of treasurers here. Now I know all the people I should have asked for to participate also, but I'm glad they're here. There's a lot of experience for good and for bad in the room. Earl, scroll down to see about submitting the answer. Did you find it? All right. That's good.
I found it, but the submit key isn't working.
I think you have to answer all the questions.
You have to go through all the questions.
All the questions, then you can submit it.
And that scrolling isn't working either. All right, let me see. Okay, I've got it now.
That's good. There's a lot of questions. Rachel, since I can't see the poll, will you share with us the results a little bit for just a few seconds once?
Yep. I'll keep it open for another 15 seconds or so.
Okay.
Thank you, babe.
Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so first question on the poll, what kind of organization are you from? By the way, we had 90% participation. Wonderful. Thanks everybody who could participate. Let's see. What kind of organization are you from? 64% are from a local historical society or museum/historic house. 6% are from a local historical commission. 6% are from a consortium or group of organizations. 8% are from a preservation/conservation organization. 6% are a historic park or landscape, and 11% are other. Question number 2, are you a treasurer for a historical organization? think that should say of. But 31% said yes with financial background of 50,000 or less organization. 11% said yes with financial background of 200,000 or less. 14% said yes without financial background of a 50,000 or less organization. 3% said yes without financial background of a $200,000 or less organization. 8% said yes, larger than 200,000 historical organization. 8% said not applicable. 33% said no. The final question is, have you had trouble finding a treasurer for your small historical organization? And you could choose all that apply here. So 56% said yes, they have had trouble. 31% said no, they have not had trouble finding a treasurer. And 14% said not applicable.
Great.
So I think I shared the results there so everyone can take a look at them.
Thank you. I'm really impressed that 56% said that they had trouble getting a treasurer. You know, that seems to be the experience. I would like to introduce our panelist today, who is Mark Romboli. He is a retired financial executive with over 40 years experience in financial management and accounting for companies ranging from $5 million to $100 million. He also has experience as a treasurer of small nonprofits. He currently works as a consultant with MDR Consulting. He is treasurer of the Cape Cod Military Museum, and he knows what's what. So
I'm not sure. We got a lot of treasurers that, got experience. So
yeah.
Right?
And plus we have
You
a
can
lot
probably
of
tell
other-
me a few things.
That's right. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to ask Mark to introduce himself for a few minutes, and then I'm going to ask him a whole series of questions. And I'm not just asking them of him, I'm also asking them of you. And this way we're going to go through the hour, and you should feel hour and a half, and you should feel to pipe up and participate, because that's the point of all of this. So Mark, you have the room.
Oh, thank you. As I said, my name is Mark Romboli. I've worked in corporate accounting, financial management for over 40 years for corporations ranging in 5 million to 100 million in manufacturing, distribution, retail, and my experience. I am not a CPA. Since I've worked in private industry for all my life, and so I don't qualify for the requirements for being a CPA. Although I did pass the CPA exam back in the 70s, but working for a private industry doesn't qualify for the experience to get the license. Currently, I'm retired. I work at my own little consulting business, and I'm currently the treasurer for the Cape Cod Military Museum, which is a very small museum trying to get started off the ground. I have experience, with nonprofits, and I do a lot of the bookkeeping and treasurer's reports, and I file the tax returns and stuff for military museum, and I've done it for a few other interest companies, nonprofits. Excuse me. That's pretty much my background. And so I hope today that I can answer any of the questions and go through and help you out based on my experience. So
All
I
right.
think that's pretty much me.
We feel very fortunate to have you. Okay, I've divvied up the questions. I have a series of questions about financial management in general. I have some stuff about, when does stuff happen? What does the calendar look like? And then after these kinds of questions, we're going to get really specific about hard stuff like, who files what, where, when. What kind of financial records do nonprofits need to keep, Mark?
Well, they should definitely keep the records of their receipts and disbursements, preferably by program if they have different types of programs, and they should keep a record of their assets, buildings, real estate, any other property and stuff that they own, If they have any types of inventory for the stuff they may sell at their museums or things that you need to keep track of that. And so that's the basic things that, you know, they need to keep.
Ye-
Especially their receipts and disbursements, as to as whether the money coming in, where the money is going, so they can report to the board periodically.
Is it okay to do that on an Excel sheet?
Sure. It's you can do that on, you're more comfortable doing it on on a spreadsheet, that's perfectly okay. Or you can get yourself a small general ledger system and keep it on with that. Either
Okay.
one, it works. Whatever works most comfortable for your organization, for you.
Is there any way to find a spreadsheet somewhere, a sample spreadsheet? That,
Yes,
okay, great.
I do have one.
I will send it around with, if you share it with me, I will send it. We
Okay, I'll send it to you
everybody.
right now.
Great, that's wonderful. And we will send it around to everybody. This is at the moment how MHA is doing its bookkeeping, because we are very small. And it certainly works, and it costs a lot less money than going for some kind of online service. Mark, we can do that later. There's no reason
Okay,
to do it right now.
all right.
When do you think an organization would need an accountant or a CPA or an accountant?
I think it pretty much depends on the size of the organization and the experience of the treasurer and the person that's doing it. You know, most times you don't, unless you get to really large, up into the 100,000 to 200,000 or above range, you need any type of audits. But if you want to have a CPA to prepare your tax returns and things like that, you know, it all depends on how comfortable the person is with doing it and has the experience that the person has.
So you told me yesterday, I think, something that about when it might be smart to start using services like QuickBooks.
Yeah, you can start with QuickBooks, you know, right off the bat. QuickBooks has a nonprofits, you know, things that they have where you can track your donations and members and donation lists and things like that. But QuickBooks, I looked at QuickBooks yesterday. I think the online version of QuickBooks goes to somewhere around $90 a month. That could be expensive for a small business. There are other small programs. I have the little list here that I made up for myself as I find it. Okay. You know, there's a thing called Odoo Online, and it has free accounting software. I know with the bank I have, Cape Cod 5 for the museum, they offer a program called Autobooks, which is a small, you can track your receipts and disbursements and code them, and it goes right, and they have a small general ledger system, and that you can use, and they produce you know, they have a built-in chart of accounts and that can be modified and changed. So you're looking, so the first thing is you look to your banks. Some, as I said, maybe some of the other banks are affiliated with this Autobooks, or they might have other programs that's available to your bank to track your receipts and disbursements. If you're familiar with QuickBooks and an accounting software, you know, you can use QuickBooks. QuickBooks is good. But it all depends, but sometimes the QuickBooks in the hands of the inexperienced can be a disaster.
One of the things that we have at MHA is that we are an online organization, and so we kind of feel that we need that we need to have access online. So we have been looking at using QuickBooks so that we can have more than one person look at things when necessary, especially when it comes to donors, et cetera. That's usually a different person. I have a question for you from Stephen Gilchrist.
Yes.
Yes. Hi, Mark.
Hi.
What was the name of the first company that you mentioned? Odoo, something like that?
Odoo.
Odoo.
It's ODOO online.
Oh, oh.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a more specific question. What should reporting to the board look like? We all know we
Well,
have to report to the board.
You should have the basic financial statements, which is a balance sheet or a statement of financial position, as they call it in the nonprofit world, statement of revenue and expenses, and a cash flow statement. So you can see where your money came in and your money's going out. And other than additional things, you can report to your board. You might have specific programs that you're running, fundraisers, and you might want to report on that as to, profit, make money, did you lose money on it? And those, but the basic statement, you should, the statement of financial position, statement of revenue and expenses, and cash flow statement. Those should be the basics that you report to the board. And then it all depends on what your board is interested in and what they're looking for.
Right. So can you say it one more time, the three basic reports?
Statement of financial position, which
Right.
is what they call a balance sheet. That lists your assets and liabilities and your fund balance on net assets. Your statement of revenue and expenses, which shows whether you've made money, you've lost money, if you've broken even. And a cash flow statement, which is basically, your money coming in, your money going out.
That's great. I think that's really useful. I have a hand up from Patrice Gazzati. Gattazzi. I'm sorry, I murdered your name.
That's okay. It's Gattazzi. I do these reports, but do you do it for the month or the year to date? Like every month I do it. So I'm just curious about that.
If you do it every month, I would report the month and year to date.
Okay.
Okay, and I have a question from Earl Taylor, who keeps the books for MHA. What is the difference between revenue and expenses and cash flow?
Well, revenue and expenses, it depends whether you're on an accrual basis or you're on a cash basis. If you're on accrual basis, your revenue and expenses would include things like donor receivables and money that you've recorded. But if you're on accrual basis and cash basis, it would be pretty much the same as your cash flow. Revenue expenses would be pretty much the same as your cash flow if you're on a cash basis.
But the difference would be that you might put in what you're expecting to come in.
Yeah, I mean, a cash flow statement would show you a change in receivables, change in, let's say, inventory, or did you spend money for long-term assets? Did you buy buildings or anything like that? It's a little bit different. I do have examples of the statements.
Oh, great. That would
which
be
I can send to you also. You can pass those around.
that'd be wonderful, and we'll send those around. All right. I'm gonna go into the annual calendar. When and what should financial reports and budgets be created and shared?
Oh,
What- We get a budget ready, for instance.
if you budgets we should be ready by the first of the calendar year or fiscal year of your organization, so you know what's happening for the year, and you should start preparing those probably in the last month or two of the previous fiscal year and have them ready by the beginning of the year or the first month of the year.
First month, huh?
Yeah, and financial reports, it all depends on what your board and the management of the organization wants to see it, how often they want to see it. It can be monthly, it can be quarterly. All depends on what how often does your board meet, what do they want, how often do they want to see the reports?
But you think at least quarterly, right? We
At
should-
least quarterly.
Yeah.
At minimum.
Yeah. And then filing with the IRS and Massachusetts, when does that happen?
That is required to file 4.5 months after the close of your fiscal year, unless you file for an extension, which would give you another 6 months. So for example, if you're a calendar-based organization, your reports would be due May 15th. unless you request an extension. Extension give you 6 months, and you don't have to file until November 15th.
And that's to Massachusetts?
That's also for Massachusetts,
Okay.
federal and state.
Are they, because I've seen on Massachusetts website that it's 4.5 months and the IRS 5.5 months.
No, it's 4.5, 4.5 for both.
Okay, 4.5 for both.
Yeah.
So mid-April, you're
So
due.
it's May 15th. If you're a calendar year, taxpayer, or, and it's 4.5 months after the close of whatever your fiscal year is.
Okay. Right. Yeah, so our fiscal year closes on at the last day of July. So that would be some kind in December.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's really clear. Does anybody have questions about that? I don't see any hands up. I wanted to ask you what the relationship is in form, in what it looks like between the budget and the accounting for an organization.
Oh, basically, they should be similar.
Mhm.
Because you want to report what your difference between your budget is and your actuals. So they should be in the same format, and that people can read them, and you can easily see what your difference is between what you budgeted and what your actual is happening.
So do you think that we should do that by program, or we all have different?
You can budget by program and report by program, and then what you should do is combine all the programs up into an overall organizational set of state budgets and financial reporting. So you can see it by individual programs or combined up. It all depends on what you want to see, how you want to see it,
Yeah,
and what the management and the people who are running the thing and the board wants to see. If they want to see each individual program, or do they just want to see it overall. And you do need, found in your 990s, you do need information for your different programs, because you're going to report that in your 990s. But it really depends what the organization wants to see.
yeah. I think that for the 990, it's pretty handy to keep the program
Yeah,
separate.
it is. It is.
Does anybody else have opinions on that? On the shape of what the budgeting and the reporting should look like? Because we have a lot of treasurers here. Tell us what you think. Well, nobody wants to say anything. Okay, I'll say something. As a person who has made budgets for MHA for years, it helps with, like, let's say if we make a budget at MHA and we don't break out, for instance, the Commons as a special program, that means that the person who is running the Commons doesn't know how much money you have to spend. So if we do break it out in the budget, then the person who's running the program knows where they can go with it. So that's
right.
It saves work that way. And since it has to go to the IRS that way, to my mind, it should be that way. But that's just me, and nobody else wants to fight back. So, so I prevail. Okay, I have a question, which is about security. What security do you use if more than one person is accessing the data, especially if access is remote? And I'm not sure if you were asking me that, because I said, or maybe others who are using QuickBooks can tell us about that.
Well, for security, everybody should have their own password,
Right.
and you should have one person that's the administrator, and that can change passwords. So if Johnny Jones leaves and Mary Phillips comes in, you can change you delete the password for one person leaves and the other person comes in.
Yeah.
But that's your security, that you have one administrator and making sure that your passwords and you're administrating it with passwords.
That's right. I think QuickBooks is pretty specific about that. I have a question from John Morgan from Historic Newton.
John Morganti.
Oh, Morganti, I'm sorry.
It's okay. You and some judge that I was on a jury once mispronounced my name as well. It's easier to correct you than it is to correct the judge. I want to go back to the topic of reporting to the board and in what format. my background is as an engineer, so I like to have the details match up. I've been the treasurer of Historic Newton for 7 years when I volunteered to be interim for 2 years. So that's part of the issue. But, and I work very closely with our audit committee. We have someone who chairs our audit committee that was from one of the big auditing firms. And we constantly get into the issue of auditing and accounting details versus budget reporting details. So your question of how you report activities and that sort of thing on the budget, what I have tried to do after spending 3 or 4 years now educating the board about the difference between accounting and budgeting is to try and minimize any discussion in the finance part of my report and push off issues of development, fundraising, program expenses, that sort of thing to the appropriate committees that are reporting on that. And hopefully we've gotten to the point where financial reporting at the board meeting, which we have every 2 months, is less than an hour or so that it used to be, and down to about 15 or 20 minutes, discussing the financial health of the organization and opening the door to discussion in those other areas, but then passing the baton to the appropriate committees for them to make their reports. I'm wondering what experiences you've had in getting your board, some of whom may be not financially literate, to understand your budgeting and your financial reporting to them.
Well, most of my experience is with much smaller organizations, and the board I can usually teach the board, what they need to know. And as far as I'm concerned, budgeting from a financial set of things and accounting and reporting should be the same. Because whatever your budget and your financial reporting should be the same so that you can compare budget to actual.
So is there anybody else who wants to respond to John Morganti? His question is, how do you educate the board about what your financial statement looks like and what it means? I remember when I worked for Mass Humanities and attended the board meetings, and Ellen will be able to second this for me, is that one of the things that happened during more financial heavy meetings, and especially the first meetings of the year, is that the executive director, the first thing he would say is, you have to remember, this is our purpose is to give away money. If we do our work right, at the end of the year, our balance statement will say 0. And this is a lot of new for many of you. I mean, this is, of course, outside of fundraising, right? And he really, since we had some financial heavy hitters on the board, it was very important to get them to understand that we did well if we got rid of all that money that came in. That was a sign of work well done. And so I think you're going in that direction, John, that you're basically saying people don't always understand when you get more complex. So educate. I think. Is there anybody else who wants to respond to this topic? Okay, so then I'm going to move along. I don't see any other hands. No. I'm going to move along. I have another question about security, which I'll bring back up later. I want to get very specific about the stuff that is hard for all of us. And the reason that we have this program today is that we ran into a snag at MHA, and we are tiny. We have a tiny budget, and we are mostly volunteer. And we ran into a snag, and then we were looking at hiring a CPA for a lot of money, and we were confused and trying to find someone to help us, and it wasn't very easy. I think we got through it, all of us together, but still. So I wanted to ask you some specifics about the hard stuff. Who files what in terms of the 990 to the IRS, Mark?
Well, you file the 990. If you're under $50,000 gross revenues It's very simple. All you do is file the 990N, which is basically a postcard. And you just tell the IRS I'm under 50,000 and this is my filings for the year, and like 2, 3, 4 questions and you're done. As then you have your over 50,000, then you got to look at filing a 990 EZ. A 990 EZ can be a little bit complicated because what you're reporting, especially when you get into some of the yes and no questions. You got to be really look at the questions and read the questions carefully, because if you answer them wrong, you could cause yourself problems. And above, it gets up to like, I think $200,000. After $200,000, you got to file the full-blown 990, which is much more complicated. As far as Massachusetts is concerned, they call their form PC. You take a lot of the information that's on your 990 EZ, goes into the filing of the form PC. If your total revenues is less than $5,000, you don't have to file with the state, but above $5,000, you have to file. One of the big things with the state is that you do have to send them a copy of your 990 EZ, or whatever 990 you completed has to go to the state, and they do not accept the 990N. A 990N is not acceptable. So if you do have, so if you file a postcard with the IRS, you do have to complete a 990 EZ.
So this is the snag we ran into. We weren't sure whether that we could do that we could file the postcard with the IRS. And then from the Massachusetts tax frequently asked questions, it appeared that we could simply accompany the Form PC with a 990N. But upon looking at it closely, and Mark just confirmed that by looking at the instructions online for the PC form online, you do have to fill out a 990 EZ. And so we started filling out a 990, which you have to do for the IRS online. And we thought we had to file the same one. And we got really mired, as it had to do probably with those yes or no questions that Mark was talking about. And we couldn't get out of it. We couldn't make it so that the software would accept this 990, right? We couldn't get that. And so finally, what we ended up doing is that we filed the postcard with the IRS, and then we created a paper 990 EZ and submitted that with Massachusetts. And that was okay to do.
Yeah.
So that was the key item, because then we could, whatever problem we ended in that we didn't answer right, somebody, if we did it wrong, somebody would get back to us and say, okay, you did it wrong,
Yeah.
But with the software, it just won't accept it. So that was something that we learned, and why we have this here. So now there's no more confusion. You need under 50, above 5,000 and under 50,000. No, under 50,000, you need to file a 990N. Can file 990N postcard with the IRS online. And then, but if you have more than 5,000 gross revenue, you need to file a 990 EZ with Massachusetts, but you can do that on paper. You can send in a paper form.
Yeah, I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. So
you can actually fill out the Form PC online and do it online, and just attach a copy of the. What you usually do is you take your 990 EZ and you scan it in, so you have it scanned in as a file, and then you just attach that to the online for 990.
Right, which is
Form PC.
Yeah, Earl, you have a question.
So now in the future, though, don't we have to file the 990 online? I'm sorry, the PC online.
Yes, I think that Massachusetts is getting to the point where you have to file it online.
Right, but but you can still attach to scanned 990 easy.
Easy, yes.
So in other words, you can fill it out on paper and scan it. You don't have to go through, all the fields online, which is what.
Yeah, you can download a fillable in form from the IRS of the 990EZ. You complete that, that'll give you your scanned in PDF type form that you can attach to your Form PC.
Yeah. So related to that, I think, is the question, when should you start engaging an accountant in the process of these tax forms? And what should that cost?
I would suggest, if depends on the familiarity and how people are comfortable doing it. If you're $50,000, it may behoove you to hire a CPA to prepare the forms. I think most CPAs, small CPA firms that work with nonprofits, you can probably get by with doing the Form PC and Easy for $500, $750. It's not hugely expensive, but you might be better off to doing that, because then they can ask the right questions of your information.
Does anybody in this room have experience doing it just that way? In other words, doing all your accounting yourself, and then, but then only getting a CPA firm, a small CPA firm, to fill out your tax forms? Nobody has.
I have.
Good.
I have.
And Earl has too. And so, Earl, do you have experience with the charges you were asked to pay for that?
Yes, we spend about $3,500 a year for the accountant to do that.
How big are you?
We're under 50,000 most years.
And is it just the tax returns, or does he do other work for you?
No, it's a tax return. Oh, well, I mean, he reviews us at various points in the year to be sure we're on track in order to have everything straightened out. And he reminds us we need to send the W-9, or sorry, whatever that is, at the end of the 1099s.
1099s and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they're doing other work than just preparing the tax returns.
A little bit, but I mean,
Yeah.
to prepare the tax return, they have to know what they asked for during the year, or else they have to do it all at once in January. And that's, they just split it up during the year instead of doing it all at once.
Yeah.
So, that's where you get charged, and I'd love to find someone cheaper.
So Kathleen Fahey says our accountant charges us $1,600 for our 990.
Please share your accountant's name with me.
I think all of you should start sharing accountants' names. I'm wondering if MHA should call for an accountant that's willing to take on a whole series of small historical organizations, and
That'd be great.
Get some names. I'm wondering how we should find those names. Okay, so any ideas in that direction, just put them in the chat, and we'll see if we can work on that at all. John Morganti.
I suspect that Historic Newton is probably the largest organization represented here today. We're a collaboration of the Newton Historical Society, which has a budget of about $430,000 a year, and the city of Newton contributes about $400,000 as well. So we're pretty close to almost $800,000 annually, which gives me great concern in accounting for that and reporting that, especially to the agencies. We have a part-time CPA who operates as a CFO that handles a lot of the kinds of things that you were talking about, the getting the data ready, accounting for it, and that sort of thing.
Right.
We just recently, and as I said before, we have a very active and strong audit committee as well. And I, as treasurer, sit on the audit committee as a ex officio, but don't have a vote there. But the audit committee just this past year went looking for new auditors. I will also say that since our receipts are under 500,000 for the last 4 or 5 years, we've only done a review and not a full audit, full bore audit, but we still use auditors to do that. I was very surprised. I'm sorry.
It's a whole different level of pain.
It is.
Yeah.
And so in going out to find new auditors, I was very surprised.
I can't hear you anymore.
You broke up, John.
You broke up. Uh-oh.
He's stuck.
His audio is stuck.
Yeah.
People,
Okay, John, your audio is stuck. We can't hear you.
other issue.
Audio? John, I mean. John?
Yeah, I got a reminder notice that this meeting starts in 10 minutes. For some reason, the calendar showed it at 1 o'clock and I got here on time, but anyway, the other thing was, we had previously our auditing fees. I don't have off the top of my head what we pay our CFO, but our auditing fees were approaching $15,000 to $17,000 a year, including our PCs and 990s. And I was very surprised that we had an auditor and we really grilled them on it when they came back. I believe our next year's fee is going to be only about $9,000. So
You were lucky.
and they
Yeah.
certainly were not. They were not a nickel and dime operation. I mean, we really went and grilled them on what they were doing for us for that money and how they could do it. And we'll see. We're about to embark on our process. Our returns are not. Our fiscal year ends June 30th, so our returns are not due until November. But I think we've already filed for an extension, which we normally do. So
John, let me ask, let me pick up on something you were just saying. You said that your auditing for your part-time CPA operates as it were as your CFO. And I'm curious, that essentially means you have a paid, you have a paid function in there somewhere in the actual maintenance or oversight. And so does Earl. And so I'm wondering if there's anybody else in this room who has a paid treasurer, for instance. Is there anybody who has someone doing their books that they pay? Is that a model that people follow? That does not seem to be the case. I was just curious whether what that might cost.
we have a part-time bookkeeper as well.
Okay, and do you have any idea what that how to find a part-time, a small scale bookkeeper?
No, I'm not sure how ours came to us, but it was a woman that was in the field, probably in banking, as I recall,
Right.
and this was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, decided it was time to retire, but she wanted to work X hours a week, and we said, we can take it.
This gives me an idea. Earl, go ahead.
I think you mentioned that we have a paid something or other, but we don't.
No, when you were reporting about the person who does your 990, you said that that they review your financial position a couple of times a year. Or
Right, so that's the same person who files our.
Yeah. So in some ways that there is a little bit more oversight than only doing the 990s is what I meant.
Right.
What I meant. So that's for Dorchester, I assume.
Yes.
So you just gave me an idea, John and Earl, which is that we all have local banks. Maybe we can find somebody who works for a local bank who might be interested in either doing some volunteer work or working for some, small amount of money to get things ready. Terry from the Granbury Preservation Society says that they have a CPA who does several nonprofits around the Granby and South Hadley area for $500 to $550 for all forms and filing with the state and IRS. I think we all want that name.
Well, Well, he's retired.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I knew him I lived in the same condo complex. He was a CPA. He used to do it for the Girl Scouts. And so I just approached him and asked him if he would do it for our organization. And I'm a member of various little nonprofits in Granby. And he was willing to do it because we approached many other CPA organizations and they said, if you're not making over 200,000, it's not worth you getting our business or giving us your business. It's too expensive to do a small form.
Yeah.
And we didn't want it. I was the treasurer at one time. I did not want to do the forms. I was willing to do all the bookkeeping and all the reports and everything else, but I was not going to attach myself to any kind of legal ramifications if I filled it out poorly or didn't fill it out correctly, even though I have taken tax courses. So we just approached him and he was willing, and I've given his name to various other little organizations. And he is retired, like I said, so he doesn't want to take on too many, but
So you said
that is
you've taken various courses. Did you by any chance take any online courses that other people
well,
could-
I took the H&R tax course for tax prep, and I thought I was going to do that as a sideline. I found that when you fill out somebody's taxes, if they tell you things, it better be truthful or you are liable just by putting your signature on that form. So, you need insurance for all of your board members so that they're not liable for anything. But that does not mean that you aren't getting the organization in trouble if you fill it out improperly. And
That's true.
GPS or Granby Preservation Society did have a problem with one of the treasurers not bothering to send in the state forms. And then we got something from the state saying that your federal does not match your state forms. So then we had nothing to go back to see what he had used for the state form against a 990 EZ because he didn't bother to fill out a 990 EZ to match the postcard that he sent in for the federal. So, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble if that treasurer isn't doing what he's supposed to do and tick and tying everything.
That's
Here-
correct.
And you're Mark, can you also comment on this? You are personally responsible here?
Yes, you are. You could be held personally liable. If you're doing stuff incorrectly or improperly and the nonprofit gets into trouble, you could be held personally liable.
You could lose your
the size of your
nonprofit status.
organization, whether you get officers and directors insurance, which, protects you against some of this stuff, and whether you can afford it or not.
Correct. Yeah.
But that's why I say, you're best. It might be best if you're, decently sized organization. You can find small firms which will take on this stuff for not a lot of money, and let them prepare the 990s and the Form PCs. So you're best to do that. You answer the questions wrong, and wrong, it can cause a lot of problems.
Yeah. So what's interesting is what we really need here is the yellow pages, which are a little bit harder to come by than they used to be. As soon as you search on the internet, you get everybody and their mother responding.
Yeah.
Right. I had a question for Mark with regard to, I was researching what you have to do to make sure you follow the guidelines for staying a 501c3 with the federal government, in that you need to have at least a third of your money averaged over 5 years from public sources. Now, we have rental property that we use. We're restoring a building. We would no way be able to restore that building if we had to rely strictly on our fundraisers and donations from people. We're a very small area. We have a lot of nonprofits. We're all going after the same pie. So we have to make sure our rental income does not surpass and become our main source of income in order to remain a nonprofit.
I'd have to look that up. I'm not that quite familiar with that, to be honest with you.
Well, right on your, on the 990 or the 990Z, there are columns to put down your income for the different years. And that's what they do is they look at, well, how many members do you have? What's you're getting you're getting money from your membership. You're getting donations from public sources just by having fundraisers.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they just give you money to support your cause. And then we have rental, and that's the bulk of our income. And that is, you have to be careful that you're not exceeding to have more of your money coming from the rental or a different source based on your mission, such that you will not exceed that
starts to really play if you happen to have a historic house that you rent out for weddings and stuff like that.
Well, we have garages that we rent for storage.
Yeah.
And we do, at one point, we have been approached to rent out an auditorium that we have in the building for events from the Cultural Council or for weddings or for movies or whatever. So we have to be careful how much is coming from that source, which is more of a commercial type of income than a public income.
Yes, but there's also
Terry,
a report
I think-
you sent to the IRS for that type of thing that's outside of your main programs. I can't think of the name of it right off the top of my head. But there is a separate reporting for that you can do for that.
Right,
And
so that's why we use an
taxes,
accountant.
then you pay tax.
Yes, and that's why we use an accountant, because it becomes too confusing for someone that doesn't have a background in accounting. And you're jeopardizing a lot if you don't fill it out correctly.
Yes.
So I have 3 people stacked up. Ellen, you have a question or you want to say something?
I have a comment. Terry, I think that although you may have unrelated business income tax
That's what I'm thinking of.
liability,
Yes, it's
UBIT, but I'm not certain that what you're saying really would qualify, be classified as unrelated business tax income. But I think that the Schedule A, the public support test that you're talking about, is really meant to make certain that you're not getting public contributions or private contributions, I should say, from a limited number of people. So then you run the risk of becoming a private operating organization instead of a public charity. So what that Schedule A does is discount, if you get a big contribution from somebody, a huge contribution, only part of that may count towards your public support test. I deal with this all the time with my organization because we get a lot of money from a limited number of people, and those things get the public support test discounts those major contributions. So it's not saying that it's not about the earned revenue versus the contributed revenue. It's the contributed revenue from a limited number of people rather than a broad base of support.
Right. Well, our renters are only 9 people, and we get about $50,000 to $50,000 from those 9 people. So, and whereas our donations are below 20, we're finding it very difficult to really generate a lot of public donations and get money from fundraisers. As I say, we're a small community that has, I can't tell you how many nonprofits that are trying to take money from the same pie.
Yeah. So this is something really to watch for, right? That you need to, if you have this kind of situation, it sounds like you really do need to hire a CPA or someone like that. I have Mike Petoskey with his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Question, a follow-up with Mark on the unrelated business expense. Is it a K1 file, a K1 form that needs to be filed for that?
I don't know the name of the form right off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'd have to look it up, because I haven't done one in a while.
So that is unrelated business income.
Unrelated business income, which is basically income that you're getting that's not directly related to the primary purpose of the nonprofit.
So does that start to play if, let's say, you know, I have a venue and I start renting it out for weddings on the weekends? That's not my purpose.
I would say, yeah, I would say that's not purpose.
Right. So that's unrelated income. So
I
I
would
think
say, I would say off the top of my head, that could be unrelated business income.
right, right.
A follow-up, if I may.
Yeah.
The Uxbridge Historical Society operates out of and runs a historic house museum. The house is owned by the town. So is the use of town property a donation in kind from the municipality?
I'm not sure on that, to be honest. It could be. I'm not, but I would have to check on that. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Thank you.
All right. I have another question from Julie, who says, who else is affiliated with a nonprofit which is required to file review level documents? How much does the CPA charge? Mark, can you tell us what review level documents are?
Review level documents would be that the CPA does not actually do an audit, does not report on the financial statements, doesn't give us an audit accounting report, which basically says that the statements are in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles. He hasn't performed an audit, which means he hasn't gone in and tested the records. Excuse me, and does test and all that work to do it, satisfy himself that the reports are right. He's looked at them, he's reviewed them, he's maybe looked at a couple some small stuff or some whatever he wants, but he's not doing a full-blown audit, and he's
So
just doing review.
yeah. That's what John Morganti was talking about, doing a review.
So
level.
he's not attesting to the correctness or completeness or of the financial statements. He hasn't, so he's not reporting on that. Where if you have an audit, he actually does a report, and he gives a report to the board of directors that you know, he's attested to the financial statements are properly within generally accepted accounting principles.
Yeah, okay.
That they meet the requirements of GAAP, general accounting principles. It's information provided by the organization's management and has not been verified by.
Right, that's right. That's right. That's right. So they might be lying, but they've done it, but they've done the books right. So Julie asks, how much does that CPA charge? And that sounds like John was talking about having a CPA charging $9,000 for that.
Yeah,
I think.
Somebody 9,000 was for the review. I don't have offhand how much we pay our CPA to prepare the information that goes into the review.
Okay. That was for the review itself. Okay, I see. Ed Brown says that CCGS, which is a small nonprofit, pays $698 a year for officers' liability insurance. Does anybody else have experience with officers' liability insurance? So that's just informational, I think, specifically. I wanted to see if are there any specific questions about tax forms or CPAs or things like that? Pipe up now. I mean, you can still pipe up after, but I wanted to just segue. Okay,
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What about being a fiscal agent for somebody? Like, I just had a situation and somebody from my board accepted a check on somebody else's behalf, and I was really uncomfortable with it, but they aren't a 501c3 and they just wanted to change hands with the money to give it to somebody. And I just want to ask you, how do you account for being a fiscal agent for somebody else?
My board won't approve those
No.
fiscal agencies. It's you take on the liability of having that money spent properly, used properly. And so if it went through your hands, you need to have a system to verify, how the money came in, how it went out by the subgroup, the other group,
Right.
track it. They need to report to you. They need to sign a lot of forms to be sure that you can confirm that it was spent in a proper
Okay.
manner for their mission.
Okay, thank you. I was very uncomfortable, was already kind of done, and I was, yeah, so thank you.
Does anybody else want to talk about fiscal agency from a treasurer's position?
We were asked to do that one time. A local neighborhood organization wanted to make some improvements, raise money to make improvements. And they were hoping to avoid the cost of managing those monies as they came, and wanted to use our abilities to do that. And based on our legal advice from one of our board members, as well as the general feeling that it would be difficult to separate the group's mission from our mission if there were any major or even any significant differences. And we voted it was not something we'd want to do.
I want to advocate a little bit for the other side of the ledger, because I've been dealing with it for years. I did deal with it for years from a grant maker's perspective, and also now as from a grantee's perspective, that I'm part of a tiny little group in my town, which only does one event a year, a reading Frederick Douglass reading, and we have a local group that we have asked to be our fiscal agents vis-a-vis Mass Humanities, which requires that, and they now provide a contract that they want you to sign, and then the money goes to them, and it isn't very much money, and it's really only one check, and they get a little bit of money in the grant to offset their treasurer's efforts. And it is a way to, if you are a local historical society, it is a way to help activity happening in town that otherwise might not happen, specifically with respect to getting grants. It's increasingly difficult to get a grant if you're not a 501c3. It is also, they have just made it a lot more expensive to become a 501c3. It used to be something like $200 or $300. It is now $600 to $800 or something like that. So that really makes a difference. So I would say, yes, there's a little bit of liability, but if it's very local, a small group, people they're doing a good thing, it is a good service to do to the community as a historical organization, which not from treasurer's perspectives, but from social perspectives, might create goodwill that would that might just create good things.
Would you be able to send a copy or template of that contract? Like not the people and the names, but just something like
I yes, I can send you a copy of that contract, but more importantly, I think Mass Humanities has it on their website.
Oh, they do. Okay. All right.
But I'm pretty sure. But if not, I'm happy to find the last one for you. And it's basically it's very long. There's a lot of small print.
Yeah.
Okay, I have.
Thank you.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
We had an instance when I was treasurer where with the rentals, we were doing rental for fee service. In other words, if we had to have someone plowing the driveway, well, we'll let you rent the bay for service payment. And I had a problem with that because if you don't, you're allowing them to have the rental of the bay. And if it didn't snow, they didn't plow, but they still got the rent for free. And I said, well, how do I carry that on my books? I said, I'm not willing to do that. I said, they need to show me what their fees would be if they perform the service such that I could offset, and then they have to pay the balance of the rent because we're losing a lot of money by not renting to someone that is actually paying the rent. Or have them pay the rent and then we'll pay them for the service. So has anybody else experienced that where, you're not getting services necessarily for the rent you're providing or whatever it might be that the organization is providing?
You're asking about translating services into the spreadsheets.
Yes.
Mark, is there an accepted practice for that? For translation?
I don't know off the top of my head, to be honest with you. I have to, look it up. I don't know anything, but specifically right
I
now.
imagine that you could carry it as a loss or a donation, but I'm not a CPA or a treasurer, so I don't know.
Well,
Ellen,
if you're a nonprofit, you don't want to carry a loss.
no.
You
No.
want your money. So I was wondering if anybody else had that issue or if you can really get yourself in trouble by not reporting it properly on the books.
So Ellen told us that Ellen Dunlap said that the Worcester Cultural Coalition, which has a very large budget, pays $922 for, is that officers' liability insurance, Ellen?
Yeah, directors and officers, DNO is directors and officers, yeah.
Okay, so I think that we're looking here at a range from 698, I think it was. It's gone beyond my, it's scrolled away, but something around 7 to 922. Maybe if you're teeny, it becomes 6, but not too much below that, I bet,
Probably not.
No, insurance companies don't do things for free. It's
Is
one
that
thing-
based on the number of board members? Or do you pay based on, if you have 7 board members, do you pay more than if you had 5?
No, I don't think it's based on number of board members. It's based on I think the revenue or stuff of the organization, how much they're taking in.
Okay.
And what you're asking for in the DNO insurance.
I have a couple of more questions. There are questions that are sent in by participants. That is, if an organization has paid staff with health insurance benefits with an 80-20 split, what is the best way to deal with medical loss ratio rebates? I don't know what that means even. I think, Mark, did that mean anything to you?
Not specifically, no.
Okay. These are very specific questions. I was wondering about 2 questions. One is, if we want to save as an organization, what, Mark, do you think are the things, Ellen, I'll get to you in 1 second, once I've articulated my question.
I was going to answer the previous question.
Oh, okay.
If
And-
you have an 80-20 split with your employees, the best thing to do is when you get the rebate from the insurance company a year later, figure out how much you paid in premiums and how much the employees paid in premiums and split the rebate and give it back to the employees. That's what I always did.
So yeah, do it.
Do it on
A
the
split.
80-20 split.
Same
yeah.
80-20 ratio, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to try again because I think when organizations save, when they have money in the bank, what are the pitfalls? What are we going to do? What is your advice, Mark?
Well, it depends on how much money they have, what they need it for, and when they need it. They may, you may be able to take some of the money and put it into CDs. Now, fortunately, the interest rates on CDs have risen, So you can invest in CDs, 3 months, 6 months. It all depends what you need the money for, when you need it, and how much you can
Uh-huh.
afford to save and put into CDs. So
When,
it's a very arbitrary
yeah,
thing. There's no set thing as far as I'm concerned.
I have a related question here, which is, are nonprofits required to distribute a certain percent or use a certain percentage of what they raised and received in donations? I've never heard of that. So in other words, if I'm the organization to do good and I raise money to do good, can I use 90% to start a savings account and 10% to do good?
Well, I think basically, as I said, it depends on what you need, when you need it, when you need the money for.
So in other words, if I'm, let's say if I'm saving for to buy a historic house, it would be fine to,
I think so.
yeah. I do have a question about restricted donations, and when do you restrict money? How do you manage a restricted donation?
Oh, restricted donations are specific. The money was given to you for a specific purpose and it can only be used for that purpose. It's a very complicated thing, the restricted donations, and you have to track the money and the expenses in that a separate fund, and you have to make sure you're accounting for that properly, not using the money for if you get money to build a building, you're not using that to, for your general purposes. So you have to really account for that very separately. And
Does it have
And
to be?
if you think getting the board to understand your financial documents is difficult, try to explain to them the difference between restricted funds that are released, distributed from your investments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It gets
Yes.
really down into the weeds. So I would just advise you
probably.
that if you are accepting donations that have restrictions on them, be very clear upfront that you understand what the restrictions are
That's correct.
that the donor is imposing, because
Yeah.
you end up managing that after the fact. It can get really complicated.
I have a hand up from Ellen in response, I think.
I've struggled with this quite a bit because the Cultural Coalition gets a lot of grants. We raise money in advance and spend it out during the course of the coming years. And I was coming from an organization that had very sophisticated accounting where we could deal with temporary restricted funds. And I had to devise in QuickBooks a way of tracking these grants. And I think I came up with a pretty good solution. And if people are interested, I could share a report that I have developed. There seems to be some interest.
That would be great.
Can I just share my screen for a second? Is that
Oh,
going to be
yeah,
possible?
let me hang on a second. I'm just going to make you co-host. That way you can share it.
You see that? Anybody see that?
Yeah.
So I run a report for a statement of activities, and see, we have very little current income, just 140,000, opposed to 734,000 in expenses. But we took in these temporary restricted cash grants of 633. So I do this snapshot report, and it shows from that previous statement the revenue and the expenses, but then all the difference between what we took in current money and what we have in expenses in each of these programs comes from the grants and reserves. So then I show down here, these are each of the different grants we're tracking. This was the balance at the beginning of the year, the money that came in during the course of the year, and then what I coded to each of those different grants in QuickBooks. And I run a separate report that comes up with this, and that shows me the balance available for future spending. And my board seems to understand this, but it took a long time to get to a model that people would understand and not have too many separate reports where you're looking at accruals and a recognizing of revenue. But this is all just on one page. So I just wanted to share that.
No, That's nice. That's good.
That's really nice. Thank you, Ellen.
We have a similar report. However, it's for the use of our finance committee. We don't report the individual grants to the board unless there's specific reason to do it. If we got a particular grant, like we did recently to make a movie, we told the board a little more about that than we would a normal grant that we got for general operating purposes. But you do need a mechanism like that to keep track and to understand not only your balances, but that you're using them for the correct purposes, and that you're not forgetting to use them. We just found a fund that's been sitting dormant for 10 years that we should have been using all along, and we're starting to use it now.
So sometimes when I run the report, I'm like, oops, I've overtaxed this one grant. We don't have that much money. I've got to back some of these out.
Well, I think I'm speaking for a lot of us to say we aspire to your level of complexity. Of income and complexity.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, that's true too. But you know, grants are often a problem that way because they come in a different fiscal year than the one that you are actually, because your fiscal year and that of the grant making agency don't agree with each other. I have a few more questions. John, go ahead. A short one.
The comment about distributing a certain percentage, I believe the Attorney General's office does have some guidelines about using invested funds. So you can't receive money and hold it forever and not use it. And I don't know that they have specific amounts that you have to do, but I think there's some Attorney General guidelines for nonprofits about how you should be dispersing funds that you receive for long-term purposes.
I think
It's very possible.
yeah, and I think we're going to try to look those up. That's a really, thank you for putting that in. I have one more question, which has to do with employees versus consultants. I don't know if anybody else has those questions, but we deal with them at MHA. When do you use consultants and when do you hire someone? You know, what are the pitfalls? And if you have a small payroll, how do you manage it?
Yeah, I would say, you know, consultants, depends what you need. Really, you're hiring them just to do one specific thing. That's fine. But if they're going to be ongoing and doing the same thing over and over and over again, if they're come to your office and they work out of your place, and they may very well be an employee, not a consultant.
That when you and I were talking, we came to that was pretty key, right? The question of whether someone comes to your office and uses your equipment.
That's right. They come to your office, they use your computer, they're sitting at your desk, they're doing work, you know, specifically, and they're there like, to say 2 or 3 days a week, and they're using stuff that could very well not be an independent contractor. They could be an employee.
And what happens if the IRS comes to that conclusion?
Then you would be owed back taxes, mostly for the FICA Medicare taxes, and you would get hit with a penalty.
All right.
And you'd have to reclassify those employees as people as employees, and then start withholdings, taxes, and so forth.
Stacia Kaplanson, who's on the Mass MHA board, adds to that it has to do with whether you dictate how and when they do work. I do think that that's true. If someone is self-directed and you don't say you have to do this between 9 to 5 or whatever, right? Then they can be a consultant. Now in Europe,
they pretty much consultants pretty much come in and do things, you know, their own way, how they do it, and you don't dictate that it has to be done this specific way and this specific thing.
Yeah. Okay, so the CPA would most likely be a consultant. No,
yeah, CPAs are mostly consultants usually.
So it's interesting because if I have problems with my plumbing and I call a plumber, even if I call him 10 times a year, he still is not a consultant. I do not have to give a 1099 for him.
That's correct.
Well, how do I decide?
Well, I mean, you say plumbers, electricians, whatever else, they're, they're never an employee because they give you an invoice, they're a vendor, and you're paying them, that way. They're never an employee.
And are you
As far as
getting
I'm
a W
concerned.
nine for them? Wouldn't you have to get a W-9?
I forget the rules of 1099s, what the
Yes, you have to get a W.
requirements, but who gets the 1099, who doesn't? I'd have to look those up again. It's been a few years since I've been handling 1099s. But I know if if you pay the guy under $600, you don't have to file a 1099.
No, you have to get a W-9 that they're an individual company of onto themselves.
Oh, yeah. W-9s, yeah.
I have two questions, and after that, we're going to be done. So, Stephen, you're first.
This is not a question. I think this is possibly an answer to, it depends on who has control of to authorize or to approve someone's work. If you have control over them, then they are an employee.
That's right.
If you don't have control as to how they manage their work, etc., then they're an independent contractor, I think.
Right.
Right.
Thank
Right.
you. And John Morgan.
I was just going to say, I think it also makes a difference if they're doing your work. If you're a plumbing company and you hire a freelance plumber to come in and do some of your work, presumably that could be construed as an employee. If you're hiring a CPA to come in and do financial work and you're not a financial advisor, you're a nonprofit, they're doing something that you need to do, but it's not the work that you do. So I suspect that could be a distinction as well.
All right.
That's my opinion.
That's a good one. Well, I want to thank you all. I want to thank Mark Romboli, first of all, for coming in and plunging into the deep end of the muck and murk we all find ourselves in with respect to our treasuries and CPAs and et cetera. I think that this is an ongoing issue for small historical organizations. And so I'm going to try to push for us to create a resource guide on the Commons website that small organizations can consult. And a resource guide is a list of links with the internet. So from the internet that gives us guidance. So with that, I want to ask you if you have any links that are of use to either post them in the chat now or send them to me or to Rachel so that we can start adding those. For a research guide, we're not going to be writing stuff, but we're just simply going to organize all the links according to the topics the way that we have created them today. I want to thank you all. It's been a really interesting session. What we didn't get to was the question of how we are going to find a treasurer. And so I think we should still talk about that again sometime when it comes to organizations issues and for their management. So have a great week. Rachel, take it away.
Yeah, not much to add to that. Thank you, Clune. Just wanted to mention that I put a link to our post-event survey in the chat. So if you have a second before you get back to your workday or whatever else you're doing today, please let us know how you enjoyed this conversation. And then I also wanted to shout out our future conversations on the Commons this season. So like I said, next week, Friday, October 6th at 3 p.m., we have our History Studio on the Central Massachusetts Black History Collaborative. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out. We're going to send out an email to our listserv as well as to, if you're signed up for our emails, you'll hear about it. And then we also have, as I mentioned, a few other conversations on the Commons coming up this fall. You can find those on our website. And finally, the recording of this program will be posted in our Conversations archive in the coming days. So if you'd like to look back on this and reference it, keep an eye out for that as well. But otherwise, thanks everybody for joining us today, and we hope to see you again at another conversation soon.
Thank you very much.
Okay,